The date is November 18th, 2026. The hour is late. The light inside Windsor Castle has that particular quality it only ever seems to have on evenings when history is being quietly rewritten, a low amber glow spilling across the polished floors of St. George's Hall, catching the edges of portraits that have watched every royal generation come and go. And in the middle of that hall, standing perfectly still in a deep navy coat dress, is a woman the world has long stopped underestimating. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, the most decorated working royal of her generation. The daughter who never sought the spotlight but who, 1 minute ago, walked directly into the center of it and did something no palace briefing had prepared anyone for. She crowned Catherine, not symbolically, not metaphorically, literally, with a circlet of diamonds and sapphires that had not been seen in public in over 60 years. And what she said as she did it may quietly become the single most important sentence spoken inside that castle this decade. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what Anne handed to Catherine, why she chose this precise night to do it, what the king knew and didn't know, and why insiders are already whispering that the monarchy you thought you understood has just fundamentally shifted its center of gravity. Before we go any further, hit subscribe, because the story you're about to hear will not stay quiet for long, and you'll want to be here when the next chapter breaks. Because here's the thing. Princess Anne does not do symbolism for symbolism's sake. She never has. This is the woman who was working the day after being attacked in a kidnapping attempt on the Mall in 1974. The woman who logged more than 500 engagements a year while others logged 50. The woman who famously told a journalist, when asked if she found royal duty exhausting, that duty was not something one found exhausting because duty was simply what one did. So when a woman like that steps forward in a private but witnessed ceremony and lifts a family heirloom above the head of the next queen consort, you can be absolutely certain of one thing. She has been planning this for a very long time. Rewind 12 months. It's early winter 2025. Catherine, Princess of Wales, is still recovering from her cancer treatment. The palace is fragile. King Charles is managing his own ongoing health battle. William has visibly aged. And Anne, the quiet spine of the family, is doing what she has always done, absorbing more work, saying less, showing up more. But those close to her began to notice something. She had started meeting with Catherine privately, not the usual family lunches, not the ceremonial appearances, actual working meetings, in Anne's study at Gatcombe Park, in the smaller drawing rooms at Windsor, sometimes lasting 3 hours, sometimes longer. And staff, the kind who have served the family for 30 or 40 years, and see everything, and say nothing, began to whisper that Anne was doing something almost unheard of inside the royal machine. She was teaching, passing something down, preparing someone. Ask yourself something. When was the last time a senior royal openly mentored another senior royal in full view of household staff? Not through courtiers, not through gray-suited advisors, directly, face-to-face, woman to woman. You have to go back generations to find it. Because the monarchy, for all its ceremony, has always been governed behind the scenes by a hidden layer of men, the men in gray, the private secretaries, the equerries, the palace apparatus that outlives every reign. And that apparatus has, for centuries, decided who gets prepared, who gets sidelined, and who gets quietly cut out. Anne was doing something the apparatus had not authorized. She was cutting them out of the room. And Catherine, according to those monitoring the family's internal dynamics, was absorbing everything. Now here's where it gets even more chilling. Because what Anne was preparing Catherine for was not simply the role of queen consort. That role, however grand, is already defined. Charles laid it out for Camilla. The precedent exists, no. What Anne was preparing Catherine for was something else entirely. Something older. Something the family has quietly used for 1,000 years, but almost never speaks about openly. The role of family head, not head of state, not sovereign, not monarch, family head. The person who holds the private authority inside the House of Windsor. The one who arbitrates disputes between siblings. The one who decides which grandchildren are close and which are kept at a distance. The one who signs off on the private trusts, the country house arrangements, the education plans, the marriage negotiations, the funerals. The one who, when the sovereign is unavailable or unwell, becomes the emotional and administrative center of the family itself. For most of the 20th century, that role belonged to the late Queen Elizabeth II, before her, to Queen Mary. And after Elizabeth died in September 2022, that role did not automatically transfer to Charles. It couldn't. Charles was busy being king. He was learning a job he had waited 70 years to inherit. Somebody else quietly took up the family leadership function. That somebody was Anne. And now, 1 minute ago, in front of roughly 40 gathered members of the extended family and household, Anne handed it to Catherine. Think about that for a moment. Anne did not hand it to William. She did not hand it to Charles. She did not hand it to Edward or Sophie, both of whom would have been credible choices. She handed it to Catherine, the woman who married in, The woman the tabloids once dismissed as too middle class, too suburban, too ordinary to survive the firm. And in doing so, Anne made a statement that will echo through every royal biographer's account for the next century. The future of this family does not belong to the blood. It belongs to the one who can hold it together. Let's talk about what actually happened tonight because the details matter. The gathering was not on the official court circular. It was described internally as a private family dinner marking the 75th anniversary of a particular Windsor tradition, one that has been observed quietly since the reign of George VI. The guests included the King, the Queen, the Prince and Princess of Wales, their 3 children, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh and their children, the Princess Royal and her husband Sir Timothy Lawrence, her son Peter Phillips, her daughters Arsène Tindall and Mike, along with a small handful of the most senior household staff. Notably absent in this matters was the Duke of Sussex. Prince Harry was not invited. Sources close to the family say the omission was deliberate and mutually understood. The dinner itself was standard, 6 courses, toasts, a short speech from the king, and then, just as the coffee was being cleared, Anne stood. She did not use notes, she did not raise her voice, and she began to speak about her mother. She spoke about the late Queen's understanding that a family, even one bound by crown and constitution, needed a beating heart at its center. Someone who kept the calendar, someone who remembered the birthdays, someone who called when a grandchild was sick, someone who held the private line that the public would never see. She said her mother had done this job for 70 years and that when she died, the job did not disappear with her. It simply passed quietly to whoever was willing to carry it. Anne then said, and this line is the one staff are already repeating to trusted contacts. I have carried it for 4 years, and I have watched carefully for the one who could carry it next. Not the one who wanted it, the one who could bear it. She turned to Catherine. And here's the part nobody expected. From a small mahogany box on the sideboard, one that staff say had been quietly moved into position that afternoon by Anne's own dresser, Anne lifted out a circlet, not a state tiara, not one of the great pieces from the vault. This was smaller, older, more personal, diamonds and Ceylon sapphires set in a delicate silver band. Royal watchers who have since seen a description of it believe it to be the anthem circlet, a piece originally commissioned for Queen Mary in 1911, worn only 3 times in public, and last seen on the late Queen Elizabeth when she was still Princess Elizabeth in 1946. It has been kept privately in the family collection ever since, in a locked case at Sandringham, and by tradition, it is never worn by a reigning queen. It is worn only by the woman designated as family keeper. Anne walked the 4 steps to Catherine's chair. Catherine, according to 2 people present, went very still. She had not been told. Anne raised the circlet and said quietly, so quietly that those at the far end of the table had to lean forward to hear, Catherine, you already carry this family. Tonight we simply acknowledge it. She placed the circlet on Catherine's head. There was, for perhaps 4 seconds, complete silence in St. George's Hall. If you've made it this far into the story, hit like. Because moments like this are the ones that get scrubbed from official narratives within weeks. And this channel exists precisely to keep them on the record. Your engagement is the reason these accounts survive. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Because the king, according to 2 people seated within his sightline, did not smile. He did not frown either. His face, one witness said, went into that particular careful neutrality he reserves for moments when he has been outmaneuvered but has decided, in real time, not to fight it. Charles is not a foolish man. He would have understood immediately what Anne had just done. She had taken a private family function that has floated ambiguously between senior royals for 4 years, and she had publicly, in front of witnesses, in front of household staff who would inevitably talk, formally awarded it to Catherine. Not to Camilla, not to William, to Catherine, and Camilla. Camilla, sources say, was the second person to compose her face. She reached for her water glass, she took a small sip, she set it down. She said nothing. But those who have watched Camilla for the 21 years since she married Charles say that particular sequence, glass up, glass down, silence, is what she does when she has just been informed of something she was not consulted on and cannot object to without appearing petty. Because here's the thing. Anne had chosen her moment perfectly. In front of the king, she could not be overruled without a public family scene. In front of the family, she could not be countermanded without humiliating Catherine. In front of the staff, the transfer became, effectively, a matter of household record. It was done. It was witnessed. It could not be undone. Ask yourself something. Why now? Why November 2026? Why not last year, when Catherine was recovering, or next year, when the dust of Charles's reign had settled further? The answer, according to those familiar with Anne's thinking, is health. Anne is 76 years old. She was seriously injured in a horse-related incident in the summer of 2024, spending 5 nights in Southmead Hospital in Bristol. She recovered, publicly and admirably, but those close to her say the incident changed her. She began quietly to plan for a horizon she had never before allowed herself to acknowledge. She began to think about succession, not of the crown but of the family itself. Who would keep the ties bound after she was gone? Who would keep William human when the weight of kingship inevitably began to grind him down? Who would keep George, Charlotte, and Louis close to their cousins? Who would keep the door to Harry open, even a crack, without appearing disloyal to the king? Anne concluded, over roughly 18 months of quiet study, that only one person in the family had the temperament, the discipline, the emotional intelligence, and the popular legitimacy to do it. Catherine, and Anne, being Anne, did not lobby, she did not brief, she did not leak, she simply prepared, and then, on a Wednesday evening in November, she acted. Now think about what this means for the monarchy. Because the roles inside the Windsor family have quietly rearranged themselves tonight in a way the public will only understand in fragments over the coming months as small signals begin to emerge. Catherine will begin gently to take on private family duties that used to belong to the Queen. She will host the family Christmas planning. She will decide the seating at Balmoral. She will be the one the younger cousins call. She will be the one who sits with the king in his private study in the evenings when he wants to talk about his sons. And William, for the first time in his life, will have a genuine equal at his side. Not a wife who supports him, a partner who anchors him. Because here's the truth about William that palace watchers have been reluctant to say aloud. He has been fraying. The combined weight of his father's illness, his wife's illness, his brother's estrangement, and his own private grief over his mother, which never truly healed, has made him a more brittle man than the public realizes. He needs Catherine to be more than his wife. He needs her to be the family's keel. And Anne, who has watched him since he was a boy, understood this before he did. She has given him the one gift no courtier could give him. A wife with official standing inside the family's private architecture. And what of Camilla in all this? Camilla remains queen. Her constitutional role is untouched. She will still stand beside Charles at every state occasion. She will still wear the great tiaras. She will still receive the honors due to a queen consort. But the private family authority, the informal, invisible, deeply powerful role of family keeper, has passed her by. Insiders say this was not an accident. Anne, they say, never fully trusted Camilla to hold the family together across generations. She trusted her to hold Charles. That, in Anne's assessment, was a different job. And now, 1 minute ago, that quiet judgment has been made public inside the household. The ripples will be enormous. Expect in the coming weeks small stories to leak. Expect a photograph to appear, perhaps in Tatler or in one of the Sunday papers, of Catherine wearing the anthem circlet at a private event. Expect the court circular to begin, subtly, listing Catherine as hostess at events that were previously hosted by Camilla. Expect the household staff, who love a quiet realignment, to begin routing certain family matters directly to Catherine's private secretary rather than to the king's. Expect William to appear in the coming months visibly steadier. Expect the king, who is a proud man and a lonely one, to begin leaning on his daughter-in-law in ways that will surprise those who thought he was closer to his own children. And expect Harry to hear about this, because he will. He will hear about it from a friend, or from a former staffer, or from a discreet phone call. And he will have to decide, alone in Montecito, what it means for him. Because the woman he once called his sister, the woman who was closer to him for a decade than any blood sibling, has just been formally placed at the center of the family he left behind. She holds the door now. She decides quietly whether it opens. Think about that for a moment. The girl from Berkshire who arrived at St. Andrews in 2001 with a rolling suitcase and a shy smile, who was mocked in the press for years as too ordinary, too suburban, too unroyal, has just been crowned by the most respected working royal of her generation as the private head of the House of Windsor. Not by Parliament, not by the Church, not by the King, by Anne, which, if you understand this family, is the only endorsement that ultimately matters. Because Anne is the last living link to the discipline of the late Queen. She is the one who remembers how her mother actually ran the family, not how the biographies say she ran it. And Anne has just said, in front of witnesses, that Catherine is the one. The palace that built its entire identity on control was not, tonight, in control. Anne was. And she used her control to hand her mother's private legacy not to her brother, not to her nephew, but to a woman who was not born in any of this, and who, against every expectation, has become the one figure the family cannot function without. That is the story of what happened 1 minute ago inside Windsor Castle. But there is one more person we have not yet talked about. Because, sitting quietly at the far end of the table tonight, watching everything, saying nothing, was a member of this family whose reaction to Catherine's crowning may end up being the most consequential of all. Not the king, not the queen, not William, someone else, someone whose name has been kept out of the headlines for months. Someone whose next move, according to those close to the household, could either seal Catherine's new authority or fracture it before the year is out. We will tell that story next. If you've made it this far, hit like. Because stories like this do not stay buried for long, and every share, every comment, every subscription is what keeps this channel telling them. Subscribe now so you do not miss what comes next, because the next chapter, the one about the silent witness at the end of the table, is the one the palace least wants you to hear. Windsor is quiet again tonight. The circlet has been returned to its case. The guests have gone to their rooms. But somewhere in the castle, a light is still on in a small study, and a woman in a navy coat dress is sitting alone, finally allowing herself, perhaps for the first time in 50 years, to rest. She has done what she came to do. The next queen has been crowned inside the family, long before she will ever be crowned before the nation. And history, whether it knows it yet or not, has just turned a page.